Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Rico, CEO of SourceFind Asia, co-host of the Main in China podcast, host of the SourceFind Asia YouTube channel. I'm hanging out with one of my best friends from China, Carl Nickel. You want to give yourself a little intro there?
What's up, Suave?
So some inside jokes. So in this video, I'm gonna have a quick conversation with Carl. It's been probably over a year since I saw you. Been 2 years since you left Guangzhou. And we're going to be talking about why he came to China in the first place, his journey in China, and then how he ended up leaving China and back in the States, and what he's doing, what he's building at the moment.
See the thing with relationships, changing a life, I like the way you think, staying the way you did. Been placed with the same old things, the same old house, the same old fridge, same old friends, the same old shit. I ain't never been labelled this, and the supermarket won't make me big, so I got out of that one. I remember the days as a child with a cap gun, me, my brother and Daniel, bless. See why love is about you next. Keep my covers around my bed and it's comfy now, I see my chest. Bigger than it was before, I'm sicker than I was before, just listen.
How did you find China?
So I'll start at the beginning. So actually I was visiting our other friend Harrison, who I think has been on the show in New York.
Harrison is like the most interviewed person that I have on my, he's been on the podcast a bunch of times. He's been on the YouTube channel a bunch of times.
He's the poster child.
Just like, man, I told him.
What's up, Harrison? Yeah, I was living in Houston working for an oil and gas company. And I went out to New York to visit some friends and had an interview out there. And I hit up Harrison. I hadn't seen him, so we go way back. We were in college together, but I hadn't seen him in like 5 years. Mm-hmm. And just randomly hit him up, said, hey, I'm in New York. Let's go grab a beer. And we went out together, and he told me, hey, I found this blog of these guys that moved to China and started businesses.
So Harrison was the one who found Enter China first.
No, what happened was we both found it.
Yeah.
Well, just let me tell the story, man. Come on, you're cutting in. So we're out and about, and he's like, yo, I found this blog. These guys moved to China. They're like 25 years old. They're killing it. They started all these companies, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, is the name of the blog Enter China? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I know that. I just found it. So, and he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about moving out there. And then like 3 months later, I got on a plane.
Yeah. And then, but you went to India first, and
Yeah. I kind of I had a bucket list, all these things I wanted to do. I wanted to go hike up to the base camp of Mount Everest and ride a motorcycle in India and whatnot. So I spent 6 months doing that. The plan was I would do that, and when I ran out of money, I would go to China and teach English and go meet these guys called Enter China and figure out what's up.
And that you had to pay for the membership and stuff like that. So
yeah.
You paid. I feel like I remember you telling me you paid for the membership the day before you came.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because I was running out of money. I had a few weeks left of being in India, and I think I was down to $1,500.
Yeah.
And I had you gotta realize you've got, I think it was $400 for
I think it's 500
for the China visa.
Oh, okay.
For the China visa,
okay, yeah.
And then it's $500 to join EC.
Yeah.
And then you want a little bit of wiggle room when you're showing up to China, and then you got to spend a week in Hong Kong, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world. So I was trying to figure out okay, what should I put my money towards? Should I just be able to survive for another week or two, or should I buy the membership and hopefully get some help?
And then I met you the day, I guess this was your first day. Right?
First day, yeah. I got in the night before, and then you guys all took me out to breakfast. It was I think you, China, Mike, and one other guy.
There was another person, was it? Keenan.
Yeah.
So I remember what happened was you posted in the group that you were coming to China, and then I reached out to you, and I think Mike also reached out to you at the same time.
Yep.
And then Mike said, let's take him to Sultan or whatever for breakfast.
Yeah.
So then we took you to the Turkish spot.
Yeah.
At the time I was working out of my office.
Which became one of my favorite spots.
Yeah. At the time I was working out of my apartment, actually. So I remember walking over there
Yeah, that was before you had the office.
Yeah. It's fucking been crazy, man. All right, so then what happened? Like we started a mastermind. You introduced me to Harrison, Gary. Did I introduce you to Gary, or did you?
No, you knew Gary before that.
Yeah, I met Gary at like some EC stuff, but we didn't really hang out that much. Like I knew he was in Guangzhou, but we didn't really hang out. And I think what happened was when you came, you kind of were the glue between us. I think there must have been like an EC event where you met Gary, and then how did you meet Gary? Was it?
I met Gary at the round table event we had.
Yeah, so
Remember that was the first time I met Maurice and all the Inner China guys.
Okay,
and
so
Nick
that
Ramil.
so that was the thing. You met Gary, and then like I already knew you, and then we started hanging out, the three of us.
Yep.
And then we
And then
decided
Harrison showed up like 3 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we decided to create a mastermind group, and we started doing the Knox weekly meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
So talk about your first couple business ideas in China.
So yeah, I'd been in China for 4 or 5 months, just kind of getting my feet wet and planted, and I came up with the idea of a American culture training program for Chinese university students that plan to go to school in the U.S. So while I was here, I kept getting asked by people like, and I was studying Chinese at the time, so I was also getting the reverse effect where I was curious about Chinese culture and whatnot, and I had Chinese people constantly asking me, well, what's it like to date a white girl? Like what's it mean when you say hot versus sexy?
Yeah.
And
also, I mean, just some background. Like a lot of these kids are like gonna go study abroad, right? And they're just not like culturally, they're just not prepared.
Right.
Yeah. So that was. I mean, it was a good concept.
Yeah, they're asking questions like, how do you order food?
Yeah.
When you go out to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, initially it was you and Gary. I remember like you guys were like going to university campuses.
Yeah. So we decided
your WeChat.
Yeah, we decided to start it together. So we printed up flyers and we were out on the streets handing it out to Chinese people. And then we had a funnel system where once they got the flyer, then it prompted them to scan a QR code, which pulled them into a WeChat group.
Yeah.
And then once they were there, we gave daily lessons, and then from there we funneled them into people that would buy an in-person course, and then also the online course.
Yeah. Then I think Gary decided not to continue with that, and you started to push forward. What?
Yeah, we worked on it together for 2 or 3 months, and then I decided to push forward on my own, and then did it for another, I want to say 3 or 4 months. It was like 6 or 7 months in total.
Yeah, and I even introduced you to the school that I was teaching English at the time, and you went and did like a demo.
I did a few demos, yeah. Yeah, it's for like, I think almost 2 months. I was doing demo courses on Wednesday nights, and there'd be like 10 or 15 mostly Chinese women that would show
organic. That was my life for like 9 months. I was just teaching a bunch of rich housewives. Like, it was tough. It was quite difficult.
I'm sure it was.
Okay, moving on. So what did you try next?
So then after that, I got interested in using Facebook to drive traffic to a website.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, Facebook was kind of the up and coming #1 marketing tool. And I was interested in building a brand and figuring out how to do that. And so I started another little business called, I still got to laugh when I say it, Love Your Wiener, which was, there's a backstory. So it's a jewelry site for dachshunds, for people that own dachshunds. And basically, when we were digging into Facebook and how it works and how to drive traffic, we figured out that there's certain groups within Facebook that are more active and more likely to buy something. And we figured out that it just so happens that pet groups have a lot of activity. And then within that, you want to niche it down. So you want to find a very narrow group of people to sell to. And it just so happened that people that own dachshunds were extremely active on Facebook. So that's how I picked it.
Yeah, I mean, those
And I
are
got to make it a little cheeky too, so that's where the love your wiener
love your
came
wiener.
from.
I mean, those are around the same time. Like Harrison already started a drop shipping store around that time as well. Yeah, and I think now people are way more savvy towards drop shipping. Like they kind of
Yep.
know, but at the time
But that was,
it was a little bit.
yeah, that was before it was really a big thing. It
Yeah.
was kind of, there was very few people that knew what that was or understood it. Yeah.
And then what happened next?
So kind of a similar thing, man. I spent like 6 months on it, and I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons I learned at the time was like you really got to do something that you want to be doing, because business doesn't. I mean, you don't build a business overnight, right? It's something you take years and years and years to build.
I think it's either two things. It's either you're passionate about the business processes, or you are passionate about, or at least you enjoy the product that you're selling or the service that you're
And
providing.
I think you've got to enjoy your customers too.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing because you're interacting with them so much.
Yeah. So for me, like I always say, it's like I'm passionate about business process. So it's like I could sell whatever, man. I could be selling. I used to sell women's clothing, and I really enjoyed that. I mean, for a couple different reasons, but
I show you the similar reasons to why you enjoy your English training.
listen, I'm just passionate about educating people. Like I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's just like I'm really interested in business process. So I can sell anything, and I wouldn't get bored of it. But I do know like other people, like one of my buddies know him who is like he enjoys the process, but not as much as I do. So like the business that he had, he got burnt out after like a year and a half, and decided to just shut it down because he was like, I just don't see myself doing this for 5 years or 10 years, you know.
Yeah, that was exactly the point I got to.
Yeah.
It was like 6 months in, I'd lost a bunch of money. I wasn't having that much fun with it. And I also knew I had very strong passions in other things. And
Specifically,
so I mean, from the time I was like 20, I wanted to somehow get into green energy. That's why I got into oil and gas.
you see how I did that, the transition.
Yeah, you did that nicely. That was good.
So professional.
You've done this before, huh?
Yeah, quite a few times. Which actually brings me to one thing. I remember the mastermind. I remember the mastermind that we did where you were in the hot seat, and I think it was sort of towards the end of the drop shipping stuff, and you were like, I don't know what I want to do or whatever. So then we kind of just broke down, what are you passionate about, and what next steps would you take if you're trying to get into that? And then we started weighing up the options of you looking for a company that's already doing it and like a startup.
Yeah.
And then you started making moves towards that.
Yeah, man. I remember me, you, and Luke, who's I think has also been on here before, had a really candid conversation about that. Because I was.
Oh yeah, we did. We
was down at Sultan actually, I think.
Maybe not Sultan, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was down at a hookah lounge or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Well, I remember we had a conversation with Luke, and then also we did like the mastermind with Harrison and stuff. But yeah, Luke Francis. I've been when there's a couple of videos in Enter China with me and Luke on the Enter China YouTube channel. So yeah, and then you started making moves towards finding a startup, and
yeah, I wanted to get. I mean, I kind of had it broken out in between energy, water, food, and waste, and I was interested in doing something in one of those 4 categories, and thought the first step would be just to work for someone that's in the space. So I started just going to networking groups in Shenzhen, Hong Kong, even flew over to Taiwan briefly, and was just trying to find people in the space. And that's when I found this company called Thread International. And what Thread does is takes plastic and turns it into fabric. And at the time, they needed someone to source plastic recycling companies for them in Southeast Asia.
okay.
So I found them, got contacted to one of their persons that's based in Hong Kong. Next thing I know, I was working for them.
And I think at the time they only had one person in Hong Kong, right?
They had one person in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And then they hired me on kind of part-time to source plastic recycling companies for them in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I remember that time you were like half of the time in Guangzhou, half of the time in Hong Kong, and
Yeah, it was crazy, man. Because so I was planning on moving to Shenzhen or Hong Kong, and then I got this gig, and then I was kind of didn't make sense to move, so I was kind of in between from like March to June. I was crashing on couches and bouncing around Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you were on like a provisional thing with them for like 2 or 3 months, and then they hired you afterward.
Well, it always stayed on a contract basis. I wound
Yeah.
up working for them for almost a year, from like May to end of February the next year.
But it was also the perfect situation because you got to play around in that sandbox and learn about.
Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think it was the second day that I was officially working for them. They said, "Hey, can you go to Bangladesh?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Hell yeah, I can go to Bangladesh." So then next thing I know, I spent like 6 weeks in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Cambodia sourcing plastic recycling companies. And it was during that time that I figured out, oh wow, like waste is a big problem in Asia and globally, and there's not enough infrastructure to process it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I got my next business idea of providing the technology to process waste.
Okay. And how did you go about starting that?
It was really one thing led to another.
So at this stage, you're living in Hong Kong, right?
At this stage, I had just moved to Hong Kong. So I'll back up. So I spent 6 weeks traveling around Southeast Asia, and then decided, okay, if I'm going to go with this full on, I think I need to move to Hong Kong, just because there's a different network of people that are based in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And if I thought that if I wanted to be able to access Southeast Asia, China, and maybe Taiwan, that Hong Kong was kind of a central place to be able to do that. So yeah, I moved to Hong Kong, and then started figuring out like, okay, how can I get into this space? And through the people that I had met at Thread, I was in contact with a lot of folks. This Bangladeshi company, it was this group of American guys or Bangladeshi guys that had moved to Silicon Valley, had their careers in Silicon Valley and then had moved back to Bangladesh to start a business. And they asked me to run a new facility that they wanted to build in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. So next thing I knew, I was flying out to Phnom Penh to meet the CEO of this company, and we spent a week just surveying the landscape and figuring out if that was a place that we wanted to build a factory. And during that week, I figured out, okay, I have zero desire to spend the next 5 years basically living at this factory.
Would have been a fucking hell of an experience.
Yeah, exactly. But during that time, I figured out, okay, I don't want to run the facility, but I'd be interested in selling it.
Yeah.
And that's when I figured out this other business model where you could be an agent for a technology company and basically package the project together, figure out where you're going to build this thing and then sell the technology itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got a team together, you got investors, so can you talk about that?
Yeah. So that was in like August of 2017. I want to say, August of 2017,
Roughly, yeah.
where I started figuring out this business model. And then the next step was finding a technology that I could sell. So then I spent like 3 months just researching different technologies in the space and figuring out, like how to be competitive in the space. And that's when I found this company called Waste Away, which is a company based in the US. And what they do is they convert municipal solid waste and they turn it into fuel. And that fuel is used as a coal substitute in power plants. And so I contacted them and said, hey, I'm based in Asia. This is what I'm doing. I'm starting a company around this, and I want to sell your technology. And then from there, it was like a 5-month dating process of learning about their company and then also, testing it in the market and seeing, is this something that people want to buy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I spent like 5 months doing that, and then I flew out to Nashville, where these guys are based, in December of 2017, and pitched them on me selling their technology. And then about that time, things were progressing, so I also was putting a team together. So I found a guy that had a legal background. I knew I needed to be drawing up contracts and this sort of things. So there was 2 of us at the time. And then while I was in the US, I just got lucky. A friend of a friend of a friend happened to know the advisor to the president of Taiwan. And I got a call from the advisor to the president of Taiwan. And
was it just because, was it So I guess in a practical sense, was it just because you were talking about what you were doing, and then your
Well,
friend
yeah. So
put two and two together?
I had spent the previous 6 months traveling back and forth to Taiwan.
Yeah.
So I had met some people in the space, and they were aware that I was working on selling this new waste technology.
Yeah.
And so that's how they got a hold of me.
So
And
it's not really luck in a sense. There's like, you know.
it was, I had laid groundwork,
Yeah.
but then it was kind of lucky that it happened to fall into this person's hands.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy was personally tasked by the president of Taiwan with, quote, solving Taiwan's waste problem. And so he was looking for new technologies and new companies that could process their waste.
Mm-hmm.
They were like on a national scale, converting their infrastructure from incinerators to a new way of processing their waste. And the technology that I was selling was attractive to them for that reason.
Yeah.
So they reached out, and I mean, I remember I was in San Francisco at the time, just visiting friends and whatnot and family. And they said, it was like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And they said, can you be in Taiwan to meet the president on Thursday? And so I said, yeah. So next thing, it was like the next day I bought a plane ticket and was on a plane. Yeah.
Nice. Then you met the president.
I did not actually. So I flew out, I think I was out there by like a Friday, and they flew me out Friday to be at this big convention on Saturday.
Okay.
Where it was basically like, if you can picture, all the congressmen in the US all meeting for this event.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that. And I was kind of like this guest of honor. And so next thing I know, I'm shaking hands with, like mayors and congressmen and this and that. And, like the head of the EPA and, like all these very prominent government officials. I was the only white guy there. And it was me and the Taiwanese guy that I was working with at the time. And that's kind of how I got started.
Nice. Yeah. And then what happened after that?
So while I was there, that's when I learned that Taiwan was going through this countrywide transition. They were looking for technology companies, and they were interested in our technology. So during that time, next thing I know is I was introduced to very high-ranking government officials, and basically told, hey, we're interested in your technology, and this is what we're looking for. And then from then, it was, I spent the next 6 months doing that and figuring out, okay, like, how do I actually put this project together, and how do I actually sell this technology?
Okay. And right now you're back in the US. Mm-hmm. So why did you leave Asia, and what are you doing at the moment?
So, at the time I was trying to, I had never done any of this, right? So I was trying to figure out what my business model was going to be. How do you actually sell these things? How do these projects work? And what I found is that these projects typically take between like 2 and 5 years to put together. Mm-hmm. So I was a bootstrapping entrepreneur. I was covering all my expenses myself, and was doing marketing on the side to pay for everything, flights back and forth to Taiwan, and wining and dining people and all these kinds of things. At this point had put together a group of us. We had 5 partners that were a part of NetGreen Solutions. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to raise money. And our actually technology provider was going to come in with money just to get us through the end of the year so that we could continue the project. And then as we brought in money, things kind of fell apart. Basically, I had hired in guys that were much older than me, and they wanted to be able to have us all make decisions equally, as opposed to me leading the team.
Yeah.
And I wasn't comfortable with that, just because I had put in the time and the sacrifice to be there. And I felt like it was my company. So when that happened, we kind of disbanded, and then our investor subsequently pulled out. Mm-hmm. Because it was like, okay, well, you can't start a company without a team, right? So that all happened within the span of like 2 months, and paralleling that, I was running out of cash. I made the decision to go full time on this thing because I couldn't keep up with all the workload. And it was just like, okay, I can either go full time and just go for it, and I've got like a 3-4 month runway before I run out of money, or I can keep this thing part time and probably not do the project. So that's what I did. And then in June of 2018 was right when I ran out of money. It happened to be going home for a wedding, and so I went home for the wedding, and then once I was home, I just decided to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you started working with your dad's company.
Yeah. The timing was crazy how these things work, man. Right as I moved home, my dad bought out his partner. So my family's owned a packaging business for the last 10 years. It's industrial packaging. So we manufacture and distribute industrial packaging supplies. And he bought out his partner right as I was coming home, and then just had a lot on his plate, needed help. So in November of 2018, I started working with him, and things were going pretty good, and we're having fun together, and just decided to stay on board. So the plan right now is I'll stay on board for the next 6 to 12 months, and help them implement processes and organizational structure to help them scale, and kind of help with stabilizing the business, and then my plan is paralleling that I'm still working in the waste space. So hopefully, by the time I'm done working with my dad, I'll be able to move on and go do that.
So do you see yourself coming back to Asia?
Undecided. The plan right now is to move out to LA. But I mean, the fact is, within the waste space, most of the infrastructure problems are outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. needs infrastructure. We ship most of our waste to China to be processed right now. So it's a global issue, but it's like most apparent in Asia. So I could see myself coming back for work purposes. I don't know if I'll live here. I don't know. I'm pretty open to opportunity right now.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, how would you, I guess, if closing out the video, like how would you summarize like your time in Southeast Asia?
Oh man, it's the training grounds.
Yeah.
Right. This morning I was looking through all my old stuff and whatnot, like looking through notebooks of, just scribbles and of business plans and, trying to figure shit out.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty cool working with my dad because it's been kind of a mirror. You're seeing, okay, like I've actually learned a lot in the past few years.
Yeah.
And it was because we spent, it was like 3 years of doing absolutely nothing but trying to get things off the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you said something last night when we were hanging out about ambition, like so the people that you're meeting in the States versus like the people that you know here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you wanna?
Oh yeah, man. Just being in China when you're 23, 24 years old and trying to survive and start a business in a country you don't know, with a language you don't speak, it just makes you hungry. God, we didn't have weekends. It's like 7 days a week, 14-hour days, 7 days a week for like 3 weeks straight before we'd take a break.
Yeah.
And that was just normal. So going back to the US, it's like, I don't know, people don't have that same sense of like hunger or drive. At least, I don't know. I'm sure that, like you go to New York, you go to San Francisco, but it's different, it's just more, it's gritty being here. And so it's just different.
Well, here it's just, it's not just like, obviously there's people like that in startup culture in the US that are, working 7 days a week in Canada and whatever. There's the Gary V, followers, which I am one of them. But like here it's normal, not just for startups. Like it's just generally it's
just life, man.
It's life.
It's like
the convenience store.
I think it's still what a 6-hour workday is still normal.
The convenience store, the laundromat, whatever. Like you see the same person there 6-7 days in a row working, and it's just like they don't take breaks. Like it's
just what it is.
You take a Chinese New Year or whatever public holidays there are, but like 6-7 days a week they're grinding. Like,
Yep.
And then that just becomes ingrained in you. Like I remember when I first came here and I was teaching English, I was used to that thing of like, oh, I have the weekends. I'd go out with my friends on the weekends in Toronto. But then like that changed for me here because I used to teach English on the weekends.
Yeah.
And then it just became a thing where I was like, I don't even look at weekends the same. It's just another,
Yeah.
it's another day.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think Mark Cuban's got a book. He was talking about how the edge is taking time off so that you can get back to work.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It was like, I don't go to the gym to go to the gym. I go to the gym so that I can clear my head so I can go hustle.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It's like I go play basketball so that I can pull my head out for an hour and chill out, get that mental release, and then go back to work.
Back to work. Yeah, that's exactly that was me yesterday. Actually, I was like sitting in the office and I got frustrated at something that was going on, and I was like, let me just go work out. And I worked out for an hour. I went to the sauna, came back, and I was like, all right, let's get back into it. So it's like it's the same thing. You take a vacation, you travel when you go on vacation, so you can be recharged to get back to.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's like this weekend next for me is vacation, but it's like I'm very intentionally staying away from work, so that I can clear out my mind and go back to work. Yeah.
All right, man. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram.
All right.
Carl Nickel. Yeah.
We'll link it up in the description.
Yeah, sure.
And then also probably have a little thing somewhere here that has the Instagram, Carl's Instagram.
Right here.
Yeah, somewhere around here.
Right here.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for being on the show. This has turned out to actually be a podcast. It's going to be a video cast.
That's what we did. Yeah,
30 minutes. So
that's cool.
It's cool. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Right.
See the thing with relationships, changing a life. I like the way you think, staying the way you did. Been placed with the same old things, the same old house, the same old fridge, same old friends, the same old shit. I ain't never been labelled this, and the supermarket won't make me big, so I got out of that one. I remember the day.